Hello. I had a long day at the office and I'm in dire need of a smoke. But the entire purpose of this video is to go over some chapters in Tools of Critical Thinking Metathoughts for Psychology, second edition by David A. Levy. I had gotten not compliment. No, I didn't get any compliments. I got a comment. Sorry, that's not passive aggressive. I'm just talking. But I had gotten a comment to say, oh, this was helpful. Go over some more pages. So I'm going to go over however many chapters I can right now. And yeah, we're just going to go over these and see where it takes us. I'm going to drink this for caffeine because I am tired. I'm not going to get it on the textbook. I don't know what it is. Textbook. Informative book. I have no idea. Okay, there we go. Here, push this. Okay. So, cheers, everybody. Let's get into this. Okay. Chapter 2. The Reification Error, Comparing Apples and Existentialism, Chapter 2. And then we have a quote from Thomas Saz. And the first time I mentioned Thomas Saz, I didn't mention that I was a fan of this person. I'm a fan of Thomas Saz. He talked a lot about suicide, and he actually committed suicide himself, which is, I don't know if that's complete reality or morbidity. I have no idea, but let's read this quote. The world is a unity of the given and the constructed. Oh, that one's George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Next one is, it is difficult to determine what is given and what are constructions. What are our constructions? That's by R.D. Lang. And then Thomas says, mental illnesses do not exist. Indeed, they cannot exist because the mind is not a body part or bodily organ. Isn't that the whole point of the word mental being, the beginning of the illness, the mental illness, not a physical illness? Or he was, I don't know. I have no idea. All right. The reification error. It is tempting but misleading to regard abstract concepts as if they were concrete objects. The error in thinking is called reification. To reify is to invent a concept or construct, give it a name, and then convince ourselves that such a thing objectively exists in the world. As an example, consider the term self-esteem. It is easy to forget that self-esteem isn't something that someone actually has. Rather, it is nothing more than a concept that we have created to help us organize and make sense out of other people's, in parentheses, as well as our own, behavior. Unfortunately, however, out of other people's, in parentheses, oh shoot, I just read the same, sorry. Unfortunately, however, many well-intentioned individuals persist in reifying this construct. For instance, by advising others your self-esteem is too low, you need to get more of it. As if self-esteem were some kind of commodity that can be purchased at your local automotive supply store. The litany of constructs that are commonly reified in the field of psychology is never ending. To list but a few: the mind, intelligence, motivation, cognition, personality, the unconscious, the self, emotions, complexes, archetypes, personality traits, personality disorders, and mental illness. In fact, the traditional usage of the term mental represents one of the most pervasive and chronic reification errors in the entire mental health field. Remember that mental is a metaphorical construct, not an objective entity like patient's problem. Like a tree or stone. Sorry, I'm reading past lines. Not an objective entity like a tree or a stone. It is thus linguistically fallacious to pose the question: is the patient's problem physical or is it mental? To ask a question is to compare a concrete thing to an abstract concept. The brain is a thing, the mind is a concept. Apples and oranges are things. Existentialism is a concept. Thus, asking the question, is the patient's problem physical or mental, is as senseless as comparing apples to existentialism. Consider, as another illustration, Freud's Freud's depiction of the human psyche. In using the terms ID, ego, and superego, Freud, 1933 to 1964, did not mean to imply that these are concrete entities that have a specific location in the brain. Rather, they were Freud's shorthanded way of designating various hypothetical personality processes. Freud created these constructs as useful aids to understanding, which assisted him in depicting his view on how people work. In like fashion, the unconscious was not discovered, it was invented. Resistance was not encountered, it was conceived. Neurosis was not detected, they were declared. Exercise 2-1, differentiating events and constructs. And like I said in the first video, this is a interactable book, textbook, I think. Or I think, yes, I don't know but interactive. So they have, what is it called? They have, what did they just call it? Exercises. So this is the exercise. To give you some practice at honing your ability to differentiate concrete, parentheses, observable, phenomena from abstract, parentheses, hypothetical, phenomena, try the following exercise. For each pair of terms below, indicate which refers to physical events, and then the E, or refers to theoretical construct, C. Answers appear in Appendix 5. Humor. Okay, so is this theoretical or is this physical? Humor is a construct, I think. I believe so. Laughter. Man, a construct or a physical event? Oh, laughter? E. Yeah. E. That is a... I just read it. Physical event. I be laughing. Ha ha ha. I laugh. That's physical. Tearfulness. Okay, next one is sadness. So that's got to be tearfulness E, sadness C. And yes, the person already wrote in this book already, so I'm reading it. But I'm understanding, I haven't fully caught on yet, but it's almost like a hint. I just kind of forget what E and C is. But physical event and a construct, okay? E and C. E, physical, C, construct. Smiling, E. Happy, C. Nervous, C. Fidgety, E. Restless, E. Anxious, C. Construct. Energy, C. Construct. Activity, E. Talkative, E. Extroverted, C. Quiet, E. Introverted, C. And so on. I'm not going to go on with all of them, but you get the idea. Excuse me. You get the idea. Drunkenness, E. I'm not drunk, though. I'm just hype. Here are a few more terms to classify as either event, E, or construct, C. Free will, C. Motionless, E. love, C, disorganized, E, heavy, E, self-concept, C, and so on. The reification of theory. We're also subject to committing errors of reification when it comes to creating, testing, and evaluating certain types of theories. Let us begin by defining some key terms. First, what is a theory? Briefly stated, a theory is a proposed explanation of observed phenomena. We may further differentiate two types of theory, event theory and construct theory. Event, or type E, theories provide explanations that lend themselves to direct measurements. Thus, given the proper circumstances, an event theory can be verified or proven. When this occurs, it is no longer a theory. It is a fact. Event theories to answer a wide variety of questions ranging from the mundane to profound. Mundane to the profound. For example, why does my car stall at stoplights? What happened to the money in my desk drawer? How did the patient acquire an infection? All of that. And so on, I'll say. Under the assumption that there are actual objective answers to all questions of this type, event theories are intended to ascertain these solutions, irrespective of whether or not we currently possess the methods to do so. In other words, type E theories, in principle, confirmable. That was worded very weird. It stumped me a little bit. It kind of had me a little dumbfounded. Construct, or type C theories, by contrast, provide explanations that, by their very nature, are not directly measurable. As a consequence, even under ideal conditions, a construct theory can never be proven. This is because the explanations are in themselves intangible abstractions. Construct theories abound in many areas of study. In the field of physics, for example, there are theories of gravitation, magnetism, electricity, sound, light, and energy. In psychology, we have theories that attempt to explain everything from cognition, emotion, memory, and perception to motivation, maturation, personality, and numerous forms of psychopathology, to name but a few. In all of these instances, although the phenomena under investigation may be observable, their underlying explanations are not. An apple falling from a tree, Isaac Newton reference, I believe. Isaac Newton callback. An apple falling from a tree to the ground can be seen directly. Gravitation, however, cannot. Similarly, behavior can be directly measured. Motivation, personality, or psychopathology cannot. Now, how do we go about evaluating a theory? The answer depends on the type of theory in question. Specifically, event theories should be evaluated in terms of their accuracy. In other words, they can be judged as true or false, right or wrong, correct or incorrect. This is because type E theories are in principle provable and therefore refutable. Excuse me. This is not the case, however, for construct theories, which are never capable of being proven directly. As such, it is pointless to subject a construct theory to the criterion of accuracy. How, then, are we to evaluate construct theories? Simply put, in terms of their utility. Is the theory useful? For example, in helping us to describe, predict, or control various phenomena. Hold up. Is the theory useful, for example, in helping us describe, predict, or control various phenomena? Is Einstein's theory of gravitation more useful than Newton's theory of gravitation in accounting for the motion of celestial bodies? Is one theory of psychopathology more useful than another in helping us to alleviate human suffering? To the extent that a type C theory is useful, it should be pursued, cultivated, and applied. To the extent that it is not useful, it should be revised, reworked, or if needed, be discarded. Discarded. To the extent that a type C theory is useful, it should be pursued, cultivated, and applied. To the extent that it is not useful, it should be revised, reworked, or if need be, discarded. Why are these distinctions important, huh? Because we create nothing but conceptual, parentheses, not to mention methodological, I don't even know how to say that. Because we create nothing but conceptual havoc for ourselves when we confuse these two types of theory. Okay, sorry. In particular, we must be especially careful not to reify construct theories by treating them as if they were event theories. Whenever we naively set out to prove if a type C theory is true or false, our mission is doomed at the outset as we embark on a pointless journey through an impossible maze in the futile pursuit of an exit that does not exist. Encountering only one blind alley after the next. Why? Because the question we are asking is unanswerable. It is in fact meaningless. For instance, if we can either prove nor disprove directly that the existence of the unconscious, it is inappropriate to ask whether Freudian theory is true or false. The same may be said of so-called laws of nature. Gravity, for example, is an actual law that must be obeyed and never violated. Rather, it is nothing more than a hypothetical model, a fiction, that various theories from Newton to Einstein have created and recreated to assist them in explaining why objects in the universe appear to be attracted to other objects in the universe. One very unfortunate consequence of this confusion is that the field of psychology is teeming with outdated and empirically unsupported theories that have long overstayed their welcome. Why do such theories persist? Perhaps the most important reason is that they have never been directly disproven, which some people mistakenly take as evidence of their veracity. Could it be that these theories are in fact true? Not once we realize that they are, by and large, type C theories and thus are not capable of being proven or uating these theories. Proven or disproven, I'm sorry. In other words, correctness, parentheses, is an inappropriate criterion for evaluating these theories. They should be judged instead solely in terms of their usefulness or lack thereof. What is the lesson to be learned here? Don't make the mistake of reifying construct theories. Remember that type C theories are not objective facts, parentheses, somewhere out there, just waiting to be stumbled upon. Einstein did not discover so much as he invented E equals mc squared. Rather, they are human-made constructions, fragile and imperfect, that represents our best attempts to explain the world around us. And then they have the glossary and notes. We'll go into chapter 3. We'll go into chapter 3. Excuse me. Chapter 3. Multiple levels of description. The simultaneity, I don't know how to pronounce that, of physical and psychological events. Quote by Albert Einstein: body and soul are not two different things, but only two different ways of perceiving the same thing. Similarly, physics and psychology are only different attempts to link our perceptions together by way of systematic thought. Albert Einstein. And then this one is Blaise Pascal. Two errors. One, to take everything literally. Two, to take everything spiritually. That's a pretty good one. 1 second, please. Just make a cut. All right. I finished the rest of my energy drink. Excuse me. Still need to smoke, but excuse me. Okay. What is the relationship between mind and body? Which comes first? Does one cause the other? If so, which is the cause and which is the effect? Can one exist without the other? These questions and countless versions thereof, parentheses, have challenged philosophers for centuries. More recently, social scientists have picked up the gauntlet and grappled with new variations of this age-old theme by asking, are psychological events the cause or the effect of biological events? More specifically, for example, does neurochemical activity, parentheses, such as the release of inhibition of neurotransmitters, cause changes in psychological events, parentheses, such as thoughts or feelings? Or conversely, do psychological events cause changes in neurochemical activity? Perhaps nowhere is this debate better illustrated than in the clinician's primary diagnostic question: is the patient's problem physical or mental? As discussed in Metathought 2, the Reification error, this question is linguistically senseless because, in this context, physical and mental are non-comparable terms. It is, in other words, an error of reification to treat a theoretical construct, mental, as if it were a concrete event, physical. An even more profound flaw, however, lies in the implication that mental events are somehow not physical. The artificial and fallacious dichotomy inherent in the physical or mental question does not take into account the principle of multiple levels of description. By this, I mean that any given event can be described at different levels of analysis. At one level, for example, events can be described in terms of physical phenomena. At another level, these same events can be described in terms of theoretical constructs. The physical level of description refers to concrete events that are directly and objectively observable, quantifiable, or measurable. With respect to human behavior, we have a multitude of terms that describe phenomena at the physical level of analysis, such as biological, biochemical, physiological, anatomical, organic, neurological, neurochemical, and neurophysiological. By contrast, the construct level of description refers to abstract events that are not directly or objectively observable, quantifiable, or measurable. Rather, they involve subjective phenomena that are theoretical, conceptual, and metaphorical in describing human behavior at this level of analysis. We typically use such terms as psychological, perceptual, experimental, experiential, cognitive, and mental. What, then, is the relationship between these two levels of description? Does one cause the other? If so, which is the cause and which is the effect? Before we can address these questions, we must first take a step back and define some of the key terms and concepts. In order to say that there is a cause and effect relationship between two events, let's call them event A and B, two conditions must be satisfied, of each of which is necessary and both of which are sufficient. What the hell? Heard something outside. 1. Event A must occur before event B. 2. When event A changes or is manipulated, parentheses like a switch being turned on, then event B changes accordingly. Similarly, when event A stops changing or ceases to be manipulated, like a switch being turned off, then event B changes accordingly. Pay particular attention to the first condition, namely the temporal relationship between the events. If event A does not occur before event B, then by definition, A cannot cause B. Thus, if event A occurs after event B, then A does not cause B. If event A and event B occur simultaneously, then A does not cause B. Parentheses, and of course, B does not cause A. Again, if two events occur simultaneously, then they do not, in fact, they cannot constitute a cause and effect relationship. For instance, if a biological event occurs simultaneously with a psychological event, then one does not cause the other. Rather, they constitute a singular phenomenon, simply described at two different levels of analysis. Let's take this a step further. Can a physical event occur in the absence of a psychological event? Of course. Even after death, biochemical activity exists in the deceased body. But is the converse also true? That is, can a psychological event occur in the absence of a physical event? This supposition is groundless. In fact, it is reasonable to assume that every mental event has some corresponding physical correlation. Thinking, happiness, and creativity, for example, are no more or less biochemical than delusions, depression, or schizophrenia. They are all reflected or mapped in some form physically, whether or not we know how to measure them. In other words, psychological and biological phenomena are linked, but not causally. Rather, they occur simultaneously as one psychobiological event. Keeping these ideas in mind, let us now return to the clinical question of determining whether a patient's problem is physical or mental. The question rests on the assumption that disorders have causes that are either physical, biological, neurochemical, organic, or mental, psychological, psychogenic, functional. Put another way, it assumes that physical and mental events are independent phenomena. In one sense, the patient's problem is always physical, if one chooses to explain it at that level of description. In fact, the patient's problem may be entirely physical, since biological events can occur in the absence of psychological phenomena. However, if the patient's problem is mental, then by definition, it is also physical, since all psychological events have biological correlations. Further, the patient's problem can never be entirely mental, since psychological phenomena cannot exist in the absence of biological activity. In sum, mental and physical phenomena are not independent events. Rather, they are inexorably intertwined. Where does this leave us? With a clinical pseudo question that rests on faulty premises, and that also invariably result in misleading conclusions, specifically during the course of formulating a diagnosis. When clinicians are not able to locate any specific physical malfunction, they sometimes jump to the conclusion that since the patient's problem isn't physical, it therefore must be mental. When we consider the simultaneity of psychological and physical phenomena, this is a senseless and in fact a patently absurd deduction. As an illustration of this metathought, let us analyze the phenomenon of anxiety using this dual level model of description referred to figure 3.1. At the biological level, B1, anxiety involves the subjective perception and experience of logical level. Of apprehension or fear. I'm sorry, I skipped something. Anxiety involves specific neurochemical activity, namely arousal of the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system along with other particular neurological configurations. Concurrently, at the psychological level, P1, anxiety involves the subjective perception and experience of apprehension or fear. Thus, neurochemistry doesn't cause fear, and fear doesn't cause neurochemistry. They are equivalent and simultaneous phenomena, merely described in two different ways and at two different levels of analysis. Put another way, B1 doesn't cause P1 and P1 doesn't cause B1. Rather, they occur together as a singular P1/B1 event. The same is true for all psychological phenomena, pathological or otherwise. The relationship between physical and mental is, by definition, not concretely causal, but conceptually correlational. To elaborate on this example, let's say that a person's anxiety, event 1, causes him to want to feel better. Event 2, wants him to feel better. Event 2. This event consists of motivation to alleviate his emotional discomfort, P2, which is accompanied by the biological correlation, parentheses, or map, parentheses and quotations, or map, of this psychological drive state, B2. Event 2 then leads to event 3, namely the formulation of a plan of action or for anxiety reduction, P3. These cognitive strategies again coincide with and are reflected in particular neurochemical activity, B3. Now, let's postulate that the person decides to assuage his misery by taking an anti-anxiety medication. The outcome is event 4, which consists of the occurrence of B4, activation of the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system along with a new neurological configuration, and P4, subjective feelings of relief and relaxation. Alternatively, let's say rather than ingesting pills, the person opts to seek the assistance of a psychotherapist who promptly offers soothing words of comfort and support, which is the outcome. What is the outcome? Theoretically, event 4, there is a mosquito killing me right now, and I keep slamming my arm. I'm gonna get him real quick. Oh, I got him. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh my god. What is the outcome? Theoretically, event 4 can be essentially equivalent to the one produced by taking tranquilizers. Thus, two different courses of action, tranquilizers or psychotherapy, may lead to the same P4-B4 effect. See Metathought XIV, multiple pathways of causation. Further note that either course of action involves both biological and psychological phenomena. In this way, contrary to common intuition, psychotherapy is no less biochemical than medication. To enhance and consolidate your understanding of these ideas, try analyzing a different phenomena, for instance, insomnia, anger, sexual arousal, depression, or any example of your own choosing. Using this dual-level model of description, you may also find it helpful to map out graphically the sequence, utilizing figure 3-1 as a template. Notice in the figure illustration how the causal sequences at each level of description run parallel to each other. The arrows do not cross diagonally. And then right here it has level of description. It has psychological and it has biological P1, P2, P3, P4, and then biological B1, B2, B3, B4, and event 1, 2, 3, 4 in causal sequence of events. And here it's right here. Okay. A causal sequence of events analyzed at dual levels of description, it says. That's the figure 3-1. That's the one I just showed you. Between the two levels. In other words, we choose to analyze a sequence of events purely at the conceptual level. We could say that one psychological event causes another another psychological event. For example, P1 causes P2. Similarly, if we were to analyze the same sequence solely at the physical level, we would not be mistaken in saying that one biological event causes another biological event. For example, B1 causes B2. However, we must be careful not to confuse these two different levels of description. Specifically, psychological events do not, strictly speaking, cause biological events. Put another way, a theoretical construct can produce a physical symptom. In like manner, biological events do not cause solely psychological events. In terms of the figure above, for example, P1 does not cause B2, nor does B1 cause P2. Once again, the key point is that psychological and biological events are linked as a unit in their simultaneous occurrence. Why is all this important? Because we must not allow ourselves to be seduced into believing that once we have located a biological correlation to a psychological event, we have therefore discovered its biological cause. See metathought X, correlation does not prove causation. Does not discover, wait, hold on. We have therefore discovered its biological cause. Okay. Even worse, we must not equate a biological correlation with a biological disease. To take an example, if we find neurological differences between those persons whom we diagnose as schizophrenic and those we consider normal, it should come as no great surprise. Oh, neurological differences between the people. Okay. It should come as no surprise. Yeah. After all, we are also likely to discover neurological differences between those persons whom we call creative and those whom we do not. But what does this prove? Only that we've located the biological correlates for different types of psychological processes. However, this criterion alone does not prove that schizophrenia is a medical disease any more than it proves that creativity is not. Even if we were to find the physical correlation, the physical correlates to every psychological phenomena, it still leaves us with the formidable and complex task of defining and differentiating illness from health. See Wakefield 1992 for one such attempt. In other words, evidence of physical difference is not, per se, scientifically valid proof of medical disease. All things considered, it isn't surprising that the physical or mental question has not yet been answered. What's surprising is that it's still being asked. Wow. And they got notes, glossary terms, and that is the end of chapter 3. I think I'm going to end it right there because I can't talk in my house no more. I don't have comfort. That was chapters 2 and 3. I got a comment saying, please, or no, not please. They weren't begging me, but they were saying, do you plan on making any more videos about this? I will. If you update me in the comments about what page you're working on or what part of the book you're going, I'll see how quickly I should post these, upload them. I'm pretty sure the entire book, pretty much the entire book is written in. So we'll have answers to whatever it is these exercises wish us to have. I'm pretty sure at least. Well, I think after a while, it's not written in. But I could do that though. But yes, just let me know if you want to see more and how often or what part you're at. And yes, I'll get to this. Just let me know. Leave a comment. Do whatever. I'd love seeing comments on my videos. I love it. Even more than likes, I like comments. So, yes, that was chapters 2 and 3. Good day to you. Good day. Yeah, tip my hat. Or is that tipping your hat? That's like tipping. Oh, yeah, you're tipping it. Look, you're tipping your hat. Good day.